Before a single word escapes your mouth, your brain has already chosen a side. Your body tightens, your breath shortens, and your heart accelerates as if something vital is at risk. In that instant, logic fades and instinct takes over, not because you are weak or emotional, but because your nervous system believes your safety is being tested. Family stress doesn't begin in the conversation, it begins in the body, in ancient circuits that cannot tell the difference between emotional threat and physical danger. Understanding this moment is the difference between being controlled by your reactions and learning how to respond with clarity, strength, and calm. Before you realize you're upset, your body has already decided for you. The heart accelerates, breathing becomes shallow, the jaw tightens, and the shoulders rise as if preparing for impact. This sequence unfolds in fractions of a second, long before conscious thought enters the scene. It feels personal, even moral, as if you chose to react, but the truth is far quieter and far more biological. The brain is constantly scanning the environment for signs of threat, and in family settings those signals are amplified because emotional bonds are deeply wired into survival circuits. Long before language evolved, connection meant protection and rejection meant danger. That ancient logic still shapes modern reactions. When a family conflict begins, the brain does not hear words first, it reads tone, facial expression, posture, and memory. These signals travel rapidly through neural pathways designed for speed rather than accuracy. The brain's alarm center becomes active, prioritizing protection over understanding. Blood flow shifts away from regions responsible for reflection and towards systems that prepare the body for action. Muscles tense, digestion slows, and perception narrows. This is not dysfunction, it is efficiency shaped by evolution. The problem arises when a system designed for physical survival is asked to manage emotional complexity. Because this process is automatic, people often mistake it for truth. The surge of emotion feels like evidence that something is wrong, that someone is attacking, or that control is slipping away. In reality, the sensation is simply the body responding to perceived instability. Family dynamics intensify this response because they are layered with history. The brain does not just react to the present moment, it reacts to every similar moment stored in memory. Old arguments, unresolved pain, and unmet needs silently join the conversation, amplifying the emotional signal beyond what the current situation alone would justify. Understanding this mechanism shifts the way we interpret our reactions. Instead of seeing them as failures of character, we can recognize them as biological reflexes. This recognition does not remove responsibility, but it removes shame. Shame keeps the nervous system in a defensive loop, while understanding creates room for regulation. When people believe their reactions define them, they fight themselves internally, adding stress on top of stress. When they see reactions as nervous system events, curiosity replaces self-criticism. The brain's priority in moments of emotional overload is speed, not wisdom. It would rather be wrong than slow. This explains why responses often feel exaggerated or misaligned with values. The thoughtful parts of the brain require safety to function well, and safety is temporarily compromised during emotional threat. Expecting calm reasoning in the middle of biological alarm is like asking the body to rest while running. The expectation itself becomes another source of frustration. Family relationships also carry a unique emotional weight because they are tied to identity. Approval, belonging, and acceptance are not abstract concepts, they are processed as bodily states. When a family interaction feels destabilizing, the brain interprets it as a risk to connection. This is why even minor disagreements can trigger disproportionate reactions. The body is not responding to the argument itself but to the possibility of emotional separation. Recognizing the role of biology allows a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of trying to control reactions through force, attention can move toward the signals the body is sending. The racing heart, shallow breath, and tight muscles are not enemies, they are messages. They indicate that the nervous system has entered a protective state. Listening to these signals without immediately acting on them interrupts the automatic chain reaction. This awareness also deepens compassion for others. When someone reacts strongly in a family setting, it is rarely because they intend harm. More often, their nervous system is overwhelmed, responding to perceived threat rather than present reality. Understanding this does not mean tolerating hurtful behavior, but it changes the internal response from escalation to steadiness. A regulated brain is contagious, just as a dysregulated one is. Over time, repeated moments of awareness begin to retrain the brain. Each instance of recognizing a reaction as biological rather than personal weakens the association between emotional intensity and immediate action. The nervous system learns that not every surge requires defense. Gradually, the body becomes more flexible, less rigid in its responses. Emotional overload no longer feels like an unstoppable force but a temporary state that can be noticed, understood, and navigated with care. When emotional pressure rises, the body often reacts before the mind has a chance to interpret what is happening. Breathing becomes quick and shallow, the chest tightens, and the rhythm of the body shifts toward urgency. This change is subtle at first, almost invisible, yet it carries immense influence over the brain. The nervous system is built as a two-way conversation between body and mind. While thoughts can affect the body, physical signals often speak louder and faster. In moments of family stress, learning to slow the body becomes one of the most reliable ways to calm the brain. Breath is more than air moving in and out, it is information. Each inhale and exhale sends signals through the nervous system about whether the environment is safe or threatening. Rapid, shallow breathing tells the brain that danger is near, even if no physical harm exists. This pattern keeps the brain's alarm systems active and reduces access to thoughtful, flexible thinking. Slower breathing, especially when the exhale is slightly longer than the inhale, sends a different message. It tells the brain that the body is not running, fighting, or collapsing. Over time, this signal allows the nervous system to downshift from protection to regulation. The power of this process lies in its simplicity. The brain does not require complex reasoning to respond to breath. It responds automatically, adjusting heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension in response to respiratory rhythm. When the breath slows, the heart follows. When the heart steadies, the brain receives confirmation that the moment is survivable. This biological feedback loop creates space where emotional clarity can emerge. It does not eliminate feelings, but it softens their intensity enough to allow choice. Family stress often disrupts this rhythm because emotional familiarity lowers awareness. People may not notice their breathing change during a difficult conversation with a loved one because the focus is on words and reactions. Yet the body is quietly preparing for defense. Bringing attention back to breath in these moments is not avoidance, it is engagement at a deeper level. It is choosing to regulate the system that generates emotion rather than arguing with the emotion itself. Slowing the body also extends beyond breathing. Posture, muscle tension, and movement all communicate with the brain. When stress rises, the body tends to contract. Shoulders lift, the neck stiffens, and the jaw clenches. These postural shifts reinforce the brain's sense of threat. Gently relaxing the shoulders or unclenching the jaw can reduce this feedback. The brain interprets these changes as signs that immediate action is not required. This subtle release allows energy to return to regions responsible for understanding and empathy. There is a common misconception that calm must come from willpower. In reality, willpower is one of the first capacities to diminish under stress. The nervous system does not respond well to commands during overload. It responds to patterns. Repeating small physical signals of safety trains the system over time. Each slow breath becomes a reminder to the brain that emotional intensity does not equal danger. Gradually, the threshold for activation rises, making it easier to stay grounded in challenging family interactions. This practice also changes the relationship with time. Stress creates a sense of urgency, as if something must be resolved immediately. Slowing the body interrupts this illusion. When the breath deepens and muscles soften, the brain regains access to a broader sense of time. This expanded perspective reduces impulsive responses and allows more intentional communication. The pause created by regulation becomes a space where wisdom can enter. Scientific research continues to reveal how deeply physical regulation shapes emotional resilience. Neural circuits associated with calm and connection strengthen when the body regularly experiences states of safety. These changes are not philosophical ideals, they are measurable adaptations within the nervous system. Over time, the brain learns new default responses, making calm more accessible even before conscious effort begins. Practicing this in moments of family stress is especially powerful because the emotional stakes are high. Each regulated response sends a message to the brain that closeness does not require defense. The body learns that relationships can hold intensity without collapsing into chaos. This learning accumulates, gradually reshaping how emotional challenges are experienced. Slowing the body is not about suppressing expression or avoiding conflict. It is about creating the internal conditions necessary for honest, compassionate interaction. When the nervous system feels supported, emotions can be expressed without overwhelming the system. The body becomes an ally rather than an obstacle, guiding the brain toward balance through rhythm, awareness, and gentle repetition. When emotions surge inside the body, they often arrive as a single, overwhelming mass. There is heat, pressure, agitation, or heaviness, but no clear shape to what is being felt. The brain struggles with this vagueness. Unnamed emotion keeps the nervous system on high alert because uncertainty itself is perceived as a threat. In family situations, where emotions move quickly and history is dense, this internal blur can make even small moments feel unmanageable. The brain is not overwhelmed by emotion itself as much as it is overwhelmed by a lack of clarity. The simple act of naming what is happening inside begins to change this state. When a feeling is identified, even quietly and imperfectly, the brain shifts gears. Neural activity moves away from raw alarm and toward areas involved in awareness and meaning-making. This does not make the emotion disappear, but it makes it more organized. Anger becomes frustration, frustration reveals disappointment, and beneath disappointment there may be fear or sadness. Each label adds structure to an experience that previously felt chaotic. This process works because the brain is a pattern recognition system. It is constantly attempting to categorize experience so it can predict what comes next. When emotions remain undefined, the brain cannot predict or regulate effectively, so it stays vigilant. Naming emotions gives the brain something to work with. It transforms a flood into a stream, something that can be observed rather than something that must be escaped or fought. In family stress, this tool is especially important because emotions are rarely singular. A moment of irritation may contain traces of old resentment, unmet needs, or exhaustion. Without naming, all of these layers collide and amplify one another. The body reacts as if the present moment carries the full weight of the past. By identifying what is actually happening right now, the brain separates memory from reality. This separation reduces intensity without denying the emotional truth. There is also a profound difference between judging emotions and naming them. Judgment activates defense, while naming activates curiosity. Saying internally that one is wrong for feeling upset adds another layer of stress. Quietly recognizing, for example, that there is hurt present allows the nervous system to soften. The brain responds well to honesty when it is delivered without threat. Naming emotions in this way is not self-indulgence, it is regulation. This practice also changes how people listen to others. When someone has clarity about their own emotional state, they are less likely to project it outward. Instead of assuming intent or blame, attention shifts inward to what is being experienced. This inward clarity reduces reactivity. The brain no longer needs to externalize discomfort through argument or withdrawal because the emotion has been acknowledged. Internally, scientific studies show that emotional labeling reduces physiological arousal. Heart rate slows, muscle tension decreases, and breathing becomes more regular. These changes occur not because the situation has changed, but because the brain now perceives itself as oriented. Orientation brings safety. Safety allows choice. In this state, responses become more aligned with values rather than impulses. Naming emotions also builds emotional literacy over time. The brain learns finer distinctions between feelings, which increases emotional flexibility. Instead of swinging between extremes, the nervous system becomes more nuanced. This nuance is essential in family relationships, where emotional signals are often subtle and layered. A brain trained in emotional clarity is less likely to misinterpret intensity as danger. This practice does not require long reflection or perfect language. Even approximate labels are enough to initiate regulation. The brain responds to the effort itself. Each time an emotion is named rather than acted out, a new neural pathway is strengthened. Over time, this pathway becomes more accessible, making it easier to pause in moments that once felt uncontrollable. In emotionally charged family moments, naming what is felt internally creates a quiet boundary between experience and action. It allows emotion to exist without dominating behavior. The brain begins to trust that feelings can be held, understood, and expressed without overwhelming the system, and this trust subtly reshapes how emotional intensity is experienced in the body. When emotional tension rises in a family setting, the mind naturally narrows its focus. Attention locks onto the immediate discomfort, the sharp tone, the perceived slight, or the familiar pattern that feels threatening. This narrowing is not a flaw in thinking, it is a survival response. The brain evolved to conserve energy under stress by simplifying perception. It reduces complexity and sharpens contrast, turning situations into categories of right and wrong, safe and unsafe. While this strategy may protect the body in physical danger, it often deepens conflict in emotional relationships. Perspective acts as a quiet regulator within the brain. When the mind is able to widen its lens, even slightly, the nervous system begins to settle. This widening does not require agreement or approval, It requires recognition that the present moment is only one frame in a much larger story. The brain responds to this shift by redistributing attention away from threat and toward understanding. As perception expands, emotional intensity decreases because the situation no longer feels absolute. Family stress is particularly powerful because it touches core attachment systems. The brain associates family with safety, identity, and belonging. When conflict arises, it can feel as though these foundations are being shaken. The nervous system reacts as if survival itself is at risk, even when the disagreement is minor. In this state, it becomes easy to forget that the other person is also operating from their own nervous system, shaped by their history, stress, and emotional limits. Introducing perspective gently interrupts this loop. When the mind considers what else might be influencing the other person's behavior, the brain shifts from defense to exploration. This shift activates neural networks associated with empathy and social understanding. Empathy, in this context, is not an emotional gesture but a biological state. It signals to the nervous system that connection is still possible, reducing the need for protective responses. Perspective also softens the sense of personal threat. Stress narrows identity, making everything feel like a reflection of self-worth. A critical comment feels like rejection, and a misunderstanding feels like abandonment. When perspective broadens, the brain separates behavior from identity. It becomes possible to see that someone's reaction may be driven by fatigue, fear, or unspoken pressure rather than intentional harm. This separation reduces emotional fusion, allowing feelings to be experienced without overwhelming the system. The body responds to this shift almost immediately. Muscles loosen, breathing deepens, and the internal sense of urgency fades. These changes are subtle but meaningful. They indicate that the nervous system no longer perceives the situation as an immediate threat. With this physiological shift, the brain regains access to reflective thinking. Choices that were previously unavailable begin to emerge. Perspective is not about minimizing pain or avoiding difficult truths. It does not ask the brain to ignore hurtful behavior. Instead, it provides context, which the brain relies on to regulate emotion. Context tells the nervous system that the present moment is not the entirety of reality. This knowledge alone can reduce emotional intensity enough to prevent reactive behavior. In family relationships, perspective also helps manage expectations. The brain often carries unconscious assumptions about how loved ones should behave. When these expectations are violated, stress increases. Broadening perspective reveals that each person brings their own limitations and coping strategies into the relationship. This awareness does not excuse harm, but it prevents the nervous system from interpreting imperfection as danger. Repeatedly practicing perspective strengthens neural pathways associated with emotional resilience. Over time, the brain becomes less reactive to perceived slights and more capable of holding complexity. This adaptability allows relationships to withstand stress without collapsing into defensiveness or withdrawal. Emotional intensity becomes something that can be observed and navigated rather than something that must be resisted or matched. Perspective also fosters patience, both with others and with oneself. The brain learns that emotions rise and fall, that conflicts evolve, and that understanding often unfolds slowly. This patience reduces pressure to resolve everything immediately. When urgency decreases, communication becomes clearer and more grounded. As perspective becomes a familiar response, the nervous system begins to trust that connection does not require constant vigilance. The brain learns that disagreement and stress can coexist with safety and belonging. This learning reshapes emotional experience at a deep level, allowing family interactions to be approached with steadiness rather than fear, curiosity rather than defense, and awareness rather than automatic reaction. After emotional moments pass, the nervous system does not automatically return to balance. The body remembers intensity even when the conversation has ended. Heart rate may remain elevated, muscles may stay tense, and thoughts may continue looping. This lingering state is not a failure to cope, it is the nervous system waiting for reassurance. The brain needs evidence that the threat has passed, and without intentional recovery, it may stay partially activated, ready to react again. Understanding this changes how we relate to ourselves after difficult family interactions. Many people believe regulation must happen in the moment, and if it does not, they assume the opportunity is lost. Biology tells a different story. The nervous system learns not only from how stress begins, but from how it ends. Recovery is where resilience is built. When the body experiences a return to safety after emotional strain, the brain updates its expectations. It learns that intensity does not last forever and that equilibrium is possible. This learning shapes future responses more than perfection during conflict ever could. Recovery does not require dramatic actions. It often begins with simple, grounding experiences that signal safety to the body. A slow walk, a change of environment, gentle movement, or quiet breathing all communicate to the nervous system that the danger has passed. These signals allow stress hormones to decrease and restorative processes to resume. Over time, the brain associates emotional challenges with recovery rather than exhaustion. There is also a cognitive component to recovery that is often overlooked. The way people speak to themselves after emotional moments matters deeply to the nervous system. Harsh self-criticism keeps the brain in a defensive posture, as if the threat is still present internally. Gentle reflection, on the other hand, invites regulation. Acknowledging that the situation was difficult and that the reaction made sense biologically helps the brain release tension. This internal compassion is not indulgence, it is a signal of safety. Family stress often carries a sense of finality, as though one moment defines the entire relationship. Recovery widens this perception. It reminds the brain that relationships unfold over time and that single interactions do not determine their outcome. This broader temporal view reduces emotional urgency. The nervous system begins to trust that connection can stretch, repair, and adapt. Repair is an essential part of recovery. When appropriate, small acts of reconnection help stabilize the nervous system. A calm conversation, a kind gesture, or even a moment of shared silence can signal to the brain that attachment is intact. These experiences counterbalance stress and prevent emotional residue from accumulating. The brain thrives on repair because it reinforces the idea that relationships can withstand strain. Recovery also teaches the body how to exit stress more efficiently in the future. Each time the nervous system is guided back to balance, neural pathways associated with regulation are strengthened. Over time, the return to calm becomes faster and more accessible. Emotional intensity still arises, but it no longer lingers as long or feels as consuming. This is how resilience is built at a biological level. Importantly, recovery reframes mistakes. Instead of viewing reactive moments as evidence of failure, they become part of a learning cycle. The brain is not designed for flawless regulation, it is designed for adaptation. Each experience of stress followed by recovery teaches the nervous system something valuable. This perspective reduces fear of emotional moments and increases confidence in one's ability to handle them. Recovery also honors the reality of limited capacity. Family stress often occurs when people are already tired, overwhelmed, or emotionally taxed. Expecting immediate wisdom in these states ignores the body's needs. Recovery respects those needs by allowing space for rest and integration. When the body feels restored, the brain regains flexibility and openness. As recovery becomes a consistent practice, emotional challenges begin to feel less threatening. The brain learns that it does not need to stay on guard indefinitely. Safety becomes something that can be returned to again and again through small intentional acts. This trust changes how future stress is experienced, making room for steadiness, patience, and a deeper sense of internal security that continues to grow through repetition and care.